I was arranging flowers in my daughter Hazel's hospital room when I heard my ex-husband Dennis whisper to his lawyer. The words that came out of his mouth made my blood turn to ice, made my hands freeze on the yellow daisies I'd bought because they were Hazel's favorites. He thought I couldn't hear him from where I stood by the window, thought the steady beep of the heart monitor would cover his voice, but I heard every single word. "If she doesn't wake up, I get the $1 million life insurance," Dennis said to Gerald Voss, the same lawyer who'd tried to leave me penniless during our divorce. "How fast can we file the claim?" My whole body went numb. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what I was hearing. This was our daughter lying unconscious in that hospital bed, our 11-year-old baby girl who loved soccer and mint chocolate chip ice cream and still slept with her stuffed elephant named Mr. Peanuts. The same little girl who'd called him Daddy and ran to him with her arms wide open every other weekend, even when he disappointed her more times than he showed up. Gerald Voss shifted uncomfortably in his expensive suit, pulling out his phone to check something. "The policy is ironclad. As long as there's no evidence of foul play, the payout should be straightforward. Maybe 2 weeks after she passes." After she passes. They were talking about my daughter's death like it was a business transaction, a deal to be closed. Dennis actually smiled then, a small, satisfied smile that I'd never seen on his face before. It was the smile of a man counting money he hadn't earned yet, money that would come from the death of his own child. But what happened next changed everything. What happened next saved my daughter's life and exposed a truth so horrifying that even now, months later, I still wake up in cold sweats thinking about it. Because my 9-year-old son Colton had been there the whole time, hidden behind the privacy curtain in the corner where he'd been reading his Harry Potter book. And Colton had been watching his father for days, had seen things that my innocent boy should never have had to see. He stepped out from behind that curtain with a courage that no 9-year-old should need to possess. His small voice cut through the room like a blade, clear and unwavering despite the fear I could see in his eyes. "Dad," Colton said, and every head in the room turned to him. "Should I tell the doctors what you put in Hazel's juice box before her field trip?" The silence that followed was absolute. Dennis's face went from pale to ghostly white in the span of a heartbeat. Gerald Voss dropped his phone, and it clattered on the linoleum floor with a sound like breaking bones. Dr. Cortez, who had been reviewing Hazel's chart by the door, looked up with eyes that suddenly blazed with understanding and fury. "What did you say?" Dr. Cortez asked, but she was already reaching for the emergency button on the wall. "The little bottle. From Dad's jacket," Colton continued, his voice growing stronger as he spoke. "I saw him put drops in Hazel's juice box when he packed her lunch, 5 drops from a bottle that had a warning label on it. I remembered because I thought it was weird that Dad was making her lunch when he never does that." Dennis lunged toward the door, but Dr. Cortez had already pressed the emergency button. The security response was immediate. 2 guards appeared in the doorway before Dennis could reach it, blocking his escape. He tried to push past them, shouting that this was all a misunderstanding, that his son was confused, that children make things up all the time. But I knew my son. Colton didn't lie. He was the child who confessed to breaking my favorite vase even when I hadn't suspected him, the boy who returned extra change at the store without being asked. If Colton said he saw his father poison his sister, then that's exactly what happened. "The bottle is probably still in his car," Colton said, and now tears were rolling down his cheeks even as he stood tall. "In the black bag in his trunk, the one he always says is for work emergencies, but won't let anyone touch." Dr. Cortez's face had transformed from confusion to horrified comprehension. She grabbed the phone on the wall and spoke with an urgency that made my knees weak. "I need toxicology and police to room 314 immediately. Possible intentional poisoning of a minor. We need that vehicle searched now." Gerald Voss pressed himself against the wall, trying to distance himself from Dennis. "This wasn't what we discussed," he stammered. "You said she was already sick. You said it was just about the insurance payout timing." And there it was. In his panic to save himself, the lawyer had just confirmed the conspiracy. Dennis screamed at him to shut up, but it was too late. The truth was out, spreading through the room like spilled poison, contaminating everything it touched. I looked at my unconscious daughter, so small and fragile in that hospital bed, machines keeping her alive because her own father had tried to kill her for money. Then I looked at my son, my brave little boy who had just saved his sister's life by speaking a truth that must have terrified him to say. This is the story of how a father's greed nearly destroyed our family and how a 9-year-old boy's courage saved us all. This is the story of the worst betrayal imaginable and the most powerful love I've ever witnessed. This is what happened when evil met innocence, and innocence refused to stay silent. Life had finally started feeling normal again after the divorce. I'm Francine, and for 2 years since leaving Dennis, I'd built a peaceful routine with my kids in our small but cozy house on Maple Street. The 3-bedroom ranch wasn't much compared to the colonial we'd shared with Dennis, but it was ours. Every wall held photos of genuine smiles, not the forced ones from the last years of my marriage. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon rolls on Sunday mornings instead of burnt coffee and resentment. Hazel, my 11-year-old daughter, was the star of her soccer team, the Riverside Rangers. She'd inherited my auburn hair, but thankfully not my complete lack of athletic ability. Every afternoon she'd practice headers in our backyard, her ponytail swinging as she counted out loud, 47, 48, 49. She had this dream of making it to 50 headers without dropping the ball, and she was getting close. Her room was a shrine to the U.S. women's national soccer team, with Megan Rapinoe posters covering every inch of purple-painted wall. Colton, my 9-year-old, preferred the quiet corners of our house, where he could build elaborate Lego cities or disappear into his books. He was reading 3 grades above his level, something his teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, called remarkable. While Hazel was all motion and energy, Colton was stillness and observation. But he'd always watch his sister's games from his spot under the big oak tree, bringing a book, but rarely reading it. When Hazel scored, Colton's cheers were the loudest on the field. Dennis and I shared custody on paper, but reality told a different story. He was supposed to take the kids every other weekend and Wednesday nights. In the past 6 months, he'd canceled more than he'd shown up. "Big client meeting," he'd text at the last minute, or "emergency at the office, rain check." The kids had stopped asking why Daddy wasn't coming. They'd stopped packing their overnight bags with excitement. "It's okay, Mom," Hazel had told me just last month when Dennis canceled her birthday dinner. "Dad's busy making money. He always says money is the most important thing." That should have been my first warning. Dennis worked as a senior insurance broker at Peninsular Mutual, the same company where we'd met 15 years ago when I was a receptionist there. He'd climbed the corporate ladder with a ruthlessness I'd mistaken for ambition when we were young. Now he managed the high-value life insurance policies, the million-dollar ones that wealthy families bought. He knew those policies inside and out, knew every loophole, every clause, every possible way to maximize a payout. That Tuesday morning started with Hazel bouncing on my bed at 6:30. "Mom, it's museum day. We're going to see real dinosaur bones and the butterfly garden." Her 5th grade class had been looking forward to this natural history museum trip for months. Hazel had laid out her outfit the night before, her favorite jeans with the embroidered flowers, her lucky purple t-shirt, and the friendship bracelet her best friend Amber had made her. The night before, Dennis had made a rare appearance for his scheduled visit. What surprised me was his offer to help with the kids' lunches while I finished a work call with a client about a house showing. "I've got it, Francine," he'd said with unusual enthusiasm. "You take your call. I'll handle dinner and pack Hazel's lunch for tomorrow." I should have been suspicious. Dennis hadn't packed a school lunch since Hazel was in kindergarten, and even then he'd forgotten to remove the wrapper from the cheese slices. But I was exhausted from showing houses all day, and his offer seemed like a small miracle. "Mom, look." Hazel had shown me her lunch bag that morning. "Dad made me a special juice box cocktail. He mixed apple and grape together in my thermos. He said it's a secret recipe for good luck at the museum." She was so happy that her father had done something special for her, so pleased by this small gesture of care. Her face glowed with the kind of joy that came from believing your absent father actually loved you. I'd smiled and kissed her forehead, telling her to have the best day ever. "Take care of your sister," I'd told Colton as they climbed onto the school bus together. He'd nodded solemnly, the way he always did when I gave him responsibility. 8 hours later, my phone rang during a showing. It was the school nurse, and her voice held the kind of controlled panic that made my stomach drop to my feet. "Mrs. Merrick, there's been an emergency. Hazel collapsed at the museum. She's being transported to St. Mary's Hospital. You need to come immediately." The house keys fell from my hand. The young couple I'd been showing around stood frozen as I ran to my car, leaving them standing in the empty living room of a house they'd never buy. Because in that moment, nothing mattered except getting to my daughter. I didn't know then that I was racing toward the discovery of a betrayal so monstrous that it would shatter every belief I'd ever held about how far a person could fall. The hospital became our prison for 3 days. Hazel lay unconscious in the pediatric ICU, her small body connected to more machines than I could count. The ventilator breathed for her with a mechanical rhythm that became the soundtrack to my nightmare. Her skin had taken on a grayish pallor that made her look like a ghost of the vibrant girl who'd kissed me goodbye just days before. The soccer tan lines on her arms were still visible, a cruel reminder of the healthy child she'd been. Dr. Amelia Cortez, the lead pediatrician, was running every test imaginable. She'd been practicing medicine for 20 years, but I could see the frustration and worry etched in the lines around her eyes. "Mrs. Merrick, we're seeing organ failure consistent with poisoning, but we can't identify the substance," she explained during one of our many hallway conversations. "Her liver enzymes are through the roof, her kidneys are barely functioning, and there's damage to her nervous system. We need to know everything Hazel consumed in the last 24 hours. I listed everything I could remember: breakfast cereal, orange juice, the school lunch Dennis had packed. "My ex-husband made her lunch the night before," I said. "A sandwich, some crackers, fruit, and a juice mixture. He made special for her." Dr. Cortez made notes on her tablet. "We'll need to test anything that might be left from that lunch. Does she still have the lunch bag?" But the lunch bag had been disposed of at the museum. Standard procedure, the field trip supervisor had explained apologetically. They'd thrown everything away when the paramedics arrived. Dennis showed up at the hospital 3 hours after I'd called him, claiming he'd been in a meeting with important clients. He burst through the doors with a performance worthy of an Oscar. "My baby girl," he cried out, loud enough for every nurse at the station to hear. "What happened to my precious daughter?" He brought balloons that said, "Get well soon," and a stuffed unicorn from the hospital gift shop. He sat by Hazel's bed and held her hand when the nurses were watching, tears streaming down his face. But I knew Dennis's tells after 13 years of marriage. The way his left eye twitched when he was calculating something, the slight tap of his index finger against his thigh when he was impatient, and he was doing both. Between his theatrical displays of grief, Dennis was constantly on his phone. His fingers flew across the screen with an urgency that seemed wrong for a father keeping vigil at his dying daughter's bedside. When I finally confronted him about it, he barely looked up. "It's work, Francine. You know how it is. The world doesn't stop just because we're here. Your daughter might be dying, Dennis." He looked at me then with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold. Calculating. "The doctors don't even know what's wrong with her. I can't just sit here doing nothing." On day 3, Dennis brought a visitor. Gerald Voss walked in wearing a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. I recognized him immediately as Dennis's divorce lawyer, the man who'd argued that I didn't deserve alimony despite giving up my career to raise our children. "What is he doing here?" I demanded. "Gerald wanted to offer his support," Dennis said smoothly. "He's a family friend, Francine. He cares about Hazel, too." Gerald Voss had never met Hazel. During our entire divorce, he'd referred to our children as the minor dependents, like they were tax deductions instead of human beings. Now he stood in the corner of my daughter's hospital room, whispering with Dennis and occasionally glancing at his phone. "We need to discuss some paperwork," Dennis said when I demanded answers. "Just some insurance forms from work. Gerald's helping me navigate the medical leave documentation." But Nurse Rodney, who'd been caring for Hazel since day 1, pulled me aside later. "Your ex-husband was asking strange questions," he said quietly. "He wanted to know about survival rates, about how long someone could stay on life support, about who makes decisions if things get worse. I've been doing this for 15 years, Mrs. Merrick. Parents in shock ask about hope and treatments. They don't ask about technicalities." That afternoon, I went to the cafeteria to get coffee and try to calm my nerves. Colton had refused to leave Hazel's side, curling up on the small couch with his Harry Potter book. He'd been so quiet these 3 days, watching everything with those serious brown eyes that reminded me of my father's. I was standing in line for coffee when my phone buzzed with a text from my sister in Oregon. "Praying for Hazel. Is Dennis still the beneficiary on that life insurance policy you mentioned?" My blood ran cold. The $1 million policy we'd taken out when Hazel was born. Dennis had insisted on being the beneficiary since he was the primary earner. After the divorce, I'd meant to change it, but between work and single motherhood and soccer practices and homework help, I'd never gotten around to the paperwork. $1 million if Hazel died. Dennis would get $1 million if our daughter never woke up. Colton found me in the hospital cafeteria, his small face pale but determined. He'd run all the way from Hazel's room, and his Harry Potter book was still clutched in his hand, his finger marking the page where he'd stopped reading. His brown eyes, usually so calm and thoughtful, were wide with something between fear and urgency. "Mom, I need to tell you something," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. "I heard Dad talking to that lawyer man. They were talking about insurance money." I set down my coffee cup carefully, afraid my shaking hands would spill it everywhere. "What exactly did you hear, sweetheart?" Colton looked around the nearly empty cafeteria, then leaned closer. "Dad said if Hazel doesn't wake up, he gets $1 million. The lawyer man said something about filing papers quickly before anyone asks questions." The words hit me like physical blows. My hands shook so hard I knocked over my coffee cup, sending it crashing to the floor. Brown liquid spread across the white tiles like the horror spreading through my mind. A cafeteria worker rushed over with paper towels, but I couldn't move, couldn't think about anything except what my 9-year-old son had just told me. "There's more, Mom," Colton whispered, and his voice cracked slightly. "Remember when Dad packed Hazel's lunch? I was watching from the hallway because it was so weird, you know. Dad never makes our lunches." I nodded, unable to speak. My throat felt like it was closing up. "I saw him take a little bottle from his jacket pocket. It was small, like the vitamin drops you used to give us, but it had a different label. He put drops in Hazel's juice thermos. I counted them because I was curious. 5 drops. Then he shook the thermos really hard and smelled it before putting the lid on." "Why didn't you tell me before?" I managed to ask, though I immediately regretted the question. He was 9 years old. How could he have known? "I thought it was vitamins or something special to help her play better at soccer. Dad's always talking about performance and winning and being the best. But now that Hazel's sick and they can't figure out why and Dad's talking about money if she dies, I think maybe it wasn't vitamins." The pieces clicked together in my mind with sickening clarity. The sudden interest in packing Hazel's lunch, the mysterious illness that baffled the doctors, the insurance policy I'd never changed, Gerald Voss's presence, the questions about life support and survival rates. Dennis had poisoned our daughter for money. I grabbed Colton's hands across the table. They were so small, still little boy hands despite the grown-up situation he'd been thrust into. "Colton, listen to me very carefully. You did the right thing telling me. You might have just saved your sister's life." "Is Dad going to jail?" he asked, and there was no hope in his voice, just a sad acceptance that shouldn't exist in a 9-year-old's world. "I don't know what's going to happen," I said honestly, "but we need to tell Dr. Cortez what you saw. Can you be brave enough to tell her, and maybe the police, exactly what you just told me?" He straightened up in his chair, and for a moment I saw the man he would become someday, strong and principled and protective. "I can do it. For Hazel." We walked back to Hazel's room together, my hand on Colton's shoulder as much for my support as his. My mind was racing, planning what needed to happen next. We needed to tell Dr. Cortez immediately so she could test for the right poison. We needed to keep Dennis from knowing we were on to him. We needed to make sure he couldn't run. As we approached Hazel's room, I could hear Dennis's voice through the partially open door. He was talking to Gerald again, and they clearly thought they were alone, except for unconscious Hazel. "How much longer do we have to wait?" Dennis was saying. "The doctors are talking about running more tests. What if they find something?" "They won't," Gerald replied. You said the substance was untraceable after 72 hours. We're past that window now. Once she passes, we file immediately. The grieving father, the tragic field trip accident, no one will question it. I felt Colton tense under my hand. This was it. This was the moment that would either save Hazel's life or let her killer walk free. I looked down at my son, and he nodded. He understood what we had to do. "Stay behind me," I whispered. "When we get in there, if Dad says anything else about the insurance or about Hazel dying, you speak up just like you told me. Be loud and clear so everyone hears you." "I will, Mom. I promise." We stood outside that door for one more moment, gathering our courage. Inside that room was a man I'd once loved, the father of my children, plotting our daughter's death for money. But also inside that room was our last chance to save Hazel, to get justice, to stop a monster who wore the mask of a father. I pushed open the door, and we walked in together, ready to face the devil we'd once called family. The room fell silent as we entered. Dennis and Gerald were huddled by the window, their voices low but still audible in the quiet of the hospital room. Dr. Cortez was reviewing Hazel's chart by her bedside, while Nurse Rodney adjusted the IV drip. The steady beep of the heart monitor continued its rhythm, the only sound that didn't stop when we walked in. Dennis looked up, irritation flashing across his face. "Francine, we're having a private conversation." "About our daughter's life insurance?" I asked, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. Gerald Voss shifted uncomfortably, sliding his phone into his pocket. "We were just discussing Dennis's work situation, the financial impact of extended medical leave." Dennis's voice carried across the room, though he thought he was being quiet enough. "Look, if she doesn't wake up by tomorrow, the insurance pays out $1 million tax-free. We can split it 70-30 after your fees." The words hung in the air like poison. Dr. Cortez looked up sharply from the chart, her eyes widening with shock and then narrowing with suspicion. Gerald nodded, pulling out his phone again. "I'll need to file the claim quickly. These cases can get complicated if there's any delay. The company might start asking questions we don't want to answer." That was the moment. That was when my brave 9-year-old son stepped forward from behind me and spoke with a clarity that cut through the room like a sword. "Dad!" Colton's voice rang out sharp and clear. Every head in the room turned to him. "Should I tell the doctors what you put in Hazel's juice box before her field trip?" The transformation on Dennis's face was instant and terrifying. The color drained from his skin so fast I thought he might faint. His mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping for air. Gerald Voss actually took a step backward, his expensive shoes clicking on the linoleum floor. "Colton, buddy, what are you talking about?" Dennis said, forcing a laugh that sounded more like a choke. "You must be confused. This has been stressful for everyone." But Colton stood his ground, his small chin lifted with determination. "The little bottle from your jacket. You put drops in her juice box. I counted them. 5 drops. From the bottle that said warning on it. I saw you from the hallway when you were making her lunch Monday night." Dr. Cortez's entire demeanor changed in an instant. She moved with the swift precision of someone who just solved a critical puzzle. Her hand slammed the emergency button on the wall. "Security to room 314. Now. Nobody leaves this room." "This is ridiculous," Dennis shouted, his voice climbing to a near scream. "My son is making things up. Kids have wild imaginations. He's traumatized by his sister being sick." "I'm not making it up," Colton said, tears starting to roll down his cheeks, but his voice remaining strong. "The bottle is probably still in Dad's car. He keeps everything in. That black bag in his trunk. The one he says is for work emergencies, but won't let anyone touch it." 2 security guards appeared in the doorway within seconds, their broad frames blocking any possible exit. Dennis made a move toward the door anyway, desperation making him reckless. "I need to leave. I have a meeting. This is false imprisonment." "Mr. Merrick, stay exactly where you are," Dr. Cortez commanded, her phone already in her hand. "If you've administered any substance to your daughter, we need to know immediately. Her life depends on it." "I want my lawyer," Dennis screamed, pointing at Gerald. Gerald Voss pressed himself against the wall, his face as white as the paint behind him. "I'm not your lawyer for this," he stammered, his professional composure completely shattered. "This wasn't what we discussed. You said she was already sick. You said we were just timing the insurance claim properly." The confession hung in the air like a smoking gun. Gerald's attempt to save himself had just confirmed the conspiracy. Dennis turned on him with pure rage in his eyes. "Shut up, you idiot! Shut your mouth!" Dr. Cortez was already on the phone with the police. "I need units at St. Mary's Hospital immediately. Room 314, pediatric ICU. Possible attempted murder of a minor by poisoning. The suspect is present and contained. We need a warrant to search his vehicle immediately." She then grabbed the room phone and dialed another number. "I need toxicology here, stat. Test for ethylene glycol poisoning. Start preparing fomepizole for administration. We may have identified the toxin." Dennis had backed into the corner now, trapped between the security guards and the weight of his crime. "You can't prove anything," he said, but his voice had lost all its confidence. "Even if there was something in her juice, you can't prove I put it there." "Dad, I took a picture," Colton said quietly, and everyone turned to look at him again. "With Mom's old phone she lets me use for games. I took a picture of you holding the bottle because I wanted to show Mom you were actually making lunch for once. It's still on the phone at home." That was the final nail in Dennis's coffin. He slumped against the wall, his legs seeming to give out. One of the security guards moved closer, ready to catch him if he fell or grab him if he ran. "How could you?" I asked, my voice breaking for the first time. "She's your daughter. She loves you even when you disappoint her over and over. How could you try to kill her for money?" Dennis didn't answer. He just stared at the floor, his mask finally completely gone, revealing the monster underneath. The police found the bottle in Dennis's car exactly where Colton said it would be. Ethylene glycol, commonly known as antifreeze, sweet-tasting and odorless when mixed with juice, and lethal in small doses. The moment Dr. Cortez knew what poison to treat, everything changed. She administered fomepizole, the antidote, through Hazel's IV while explaining that we'd caught it just in time. Another day, maybe 2, and the damage would have been irreversible. Within 24 hours of starting the treatment, Hazel's eyes fluttered open. The first word out of her cracked lips was, "Mom." Her voice was hoarse, barely a whisper, but it was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. I collapsed onto the bed beside her, sobbing into her hospital gown while Colton climbed up on the other side, wrapping his small arms around his sister like he could protect her from everything bad in the world. "My throat hurts," Hazel whispered, confused. "What happened? Did we miss the butterfly garden at the museum?" Dr. Cortez smiled for the first time in 4 days. "You're going to be just fine, sweetheart. Your brother is a hero. He saved your life." The investigation moved quickly after that. The photo Colton had taken on my old phone showed Dennis holding the bottle of antifreeze, time-stamped from Monday night. Security footage from Dennis's office parking garage showed him purchasing the antifreeze from an auto supply store 2 weeks before the poisoning. His internet search history revealed months of research into undetectable poisons, life insurance policies, and how long someone could survive on life support. Dennis was arrested and charged with attempted murder, insurance fraud, and child endangerment. Gerald Voss was charged with conspiracy to commit insurance fraud and lost his law license before the trial even began. During the trial, the prosecutor presented evidence that Dennis had been planning this for 6 months, ever since his gambling debts had reached $250,000, a detail I'd known nothing about during our marriage. The judge at Dennis's sentencing was a grandmother herself, and her voice shook with controlled fury as she spoke. "Mr. Merrick, you didn't just try to kill your daughter. You tried to destroy your son's innocence and his mother's sanity. You violated the most sacred trust that exists, that between a parent and child. But you underestimated the power of a child's love and truth. You underestimated your 9-year-old son's courage and his devotion to his sister." Dennis got 25 years to life. As they led him away in handcuffs, he didn't look at any of us. Not at me, not at Colton, and not at the daughter he'd tried to murder for money. He just stared straight ahead, already calculating, already planning, already the stranger he'd always been beneath the mask. Hazel made a full recovery and returned to soccer 3 months later. Her first game back, she scored 2 goals and ran straight to Colton on the sidelines, pulling him onto the field to celebrate with her. The local newspaper ran a story about them with the headline, "Brother's Courage Saves Sister's Life." Colton hated the attention, but he kept the newspaper clipping in his room, tucked inside his favorite Harry Potter book. The mayor presented Colton with a bravery award at a city council meeting. When they asked him to speak, my shy, quiet boy stood at the podium and said something I'll never forget. "I'm just a kid, but I know brothers are supposed to protect sisters, and kids are supposed to tell the truth, even when grown-ups are being scary, even when your dad is the one being scary." The insurance company voided the policy and sued Dennis for attempted fraud. Every penny he might have gained became debt he'll never be able to pay. But more importantly, my children learned that truth has power, that courage comes in all sizes, and that real love means protecting each other, no matter how frightening the threat. Now, every morning when I pack my kids' lunches, Colton still watches from the doorway. Not because he doesn't trust me, but because vigilance has become part of who he is. He's not paranoid or damaged. He's protective and aware. At 11 years old, he's already the kind of man this world needs more of, the kind who speaks truth when others would stay silent. Hazel knows what her father tried to do. We couldn't keep it from her, not with the trial and the news coverage, but she's chosen to focus on what her brother did instead. "Colton saved me," she tells people matter-of-factly. "He's the best brother in the world." Their bond, already strong, has become unbreakable. The truth is, evil doesn't always announce itself with thunder and lightning. Sometimes it comes disguised as a caring gesture, a packed lunch, a special juice box mixed just for you. But truth has a voice too. And sometimes that voice belongs to a 9-year-old boy who loves his sister more than he fears his father. Sometimes heroes come in small packages, carrying Harry Potter books and the courage to speak when it matters most. That's what I learned in that hospital room. Monsters are real, but so are heroes. And sometimes the smallest hero can slay the biggest monster just by telling the truth. If this story touched your heart or opened your eyes to the dangers that can hide in plain sight, please share this video with others who need to hear it. Leave a comment below about a time when someone's courage saved the day in your life. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more powerful true stories that remind us of both the darkness and light in this world. Thank you for listening to our story.